Hey, it's Chris, one of your favorite videos of the month because I love talking about games. I love talking about crowdfunding. But you know what? We always get burned on crowdfunding. So this is why I started doing the look back. Where are they now? How do you feel about them now? Crowdfunding videos. And today we're talking about September 2021. The top ones from 2021, the ones that got all the hype, the ones that got all the interest, the ones that got all the cash. Where are they now? How do you feel about them now? How did you feel about them then compared to now? And where do you stand on things? So without further ado, let's go into it. So number one, we're going to start hot and heavy right here. We're going to go with Voidfall. Voidfall, right? Mind Classic Games approach to the 4X realm. A Euro-driven 4X game, from David Turksey with the solo mode, describing it as, I remember this because I talked about it, and he even commented on one of my videos saying, this is Spirit Island in space, if you will. And I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. And then I looked at it, and I looked at the rules, and I looked at the time length of gameplay, and I said, oh, I don't have that much time, right? And it's just freaking amazing. All right, let's pull up the page here. I just can't get this one out of my head. Pre-campaign, before I knew enough about it, I was probably about an 8. During the campaign, I wavered between a 4 and an 8 because I said, you know what, Mind Clash, I know that they put out solid games and almost too complex games at times with some of their previous ones. And, that's the barrier to entry with this. And I said, could I do this? 1.5 million euros essentially got thrown into this. And they're still projected for February 2023, but the latest update has them just going into pre-production from earlier in September. So that's really the question of, can it all be done? I don't think so. But that's okay because, that's still an estimate and it's better to underpromise and overdeliver either way. But how do you feel about this? Competitive, cooperative, and solo mode. If you're going to compare it to a 4X and compare it to Spirit Island and you're going to have a competitive mode Spirit Island, I mean, that sounds kind of freaking sweet if I'm being totally transparent and honest, but I don't have 50 minutes per player, which is what this little thing up here says. So that is the concerning thing. I think this is a game that I would love somebody else to own so that I can try it out to see if I would love it. Because, again, price point, I can pay $150. I can splurge occasionally and get something like this, but I don't want to splurge on something that is so far out of my usual departure and ability to play. Because, again, I'll compare it to Spirit Island. I learned how to play Spirit Island solo in order to teach it to everyone else in my group. And that was working really, really well. And it's amazing. And everyone loves Spirit Island now, except for my wife. And that's a whole nother story. But I think just everything that goes along with this is just that, right? Do you have a group that can play a game like this for 3 to 4 hours? Because that's what it's going to take you the first time or two. Especially if you're changing modes. Especially the nuances and the differences between the modes, because inevitably with a game like this there probably will be some significant ones. I'd be lying to you if I wasn't scrolling back up here and before I did this video drooling eagerly, hungrily at this late pledge button right here. I don't know if it's still live though, because you click on these occasionally and they don't actually go live and they say sorry, we're already locked, but I haven't clicked on it to find out, but I'm tempted to, right? I'm tempted to. So there you go. That's why it's number 1. Now, number 2, you may remember me talking about this one, Beast, from Studio Midhall. Out of nowhere, some guys that are still working full-time on their other stuff put out an asymmetric one versus all hidden movement style game of hunters versus a freaking beast. I got to play it. It's freaking awesome. But with some of their production updates, they just, like I mentioned, full-time jobs elsewhere, and they're just overburdened by it. Between that and COVID, China, pre-production, everything like that. So they're well behind. This was originally scheduled to be delivered in August of 2022. Well, that has flown the coop. But as I say with something like this, especially when you're transparent in these updates, which I'll pull up in a second, people care more about transparency than they do getting their crowdfunding game on times. Am I right or not? But you know what? What's also important is that you put out this game. I'm looking at the one up here, right? If you can't read that, that's Madara. Madara, right? Better late, extremely late, and an amazing game than rushed or half-baked and remain half-baked forever, because that's what it comes out to, right? And so that's why I'm okay with this. And yeah, this one came out of nowhere, to be very frank. I love the standees. I love the asymmetry. I love being the one in the one versus all games. And I don't have a one versus all hidden movement trader-esque game in this way. And that's not really trader. I just kind of threw that in there. But different monsters work differently. How you're going to be going back and forth, the dynamic, the asymmetry, the balance of this game has to be there. And so if they need to spend extra time doing it, you know what? Screw it. Have all the extra time you need. I got plenty of other games to play. We all do. So if they put out a good product at the end of this, that's what matters. You know, I agree with this quote. I agree with it. And I haven't played Mind Management, so I wonder how that quote would stack up against Mind Management. But that's the thing. And the price point is reasonable. Now, again, you can say that, you know, well, there's not a whole lot of exclusive. That's fine. But every once in a while, you do this and you back the publisher, even though there's not a ton of exclusivity, right? That's what I'm doing with Daybreak right now, as you know, this video is currently filming, right? There's just stuff that you do that way that wouldn't get made elsewise, and this is an example of that. Pre-hype, 6. Post-hype, 8.5. Still hyped, 8.5. I still think it's that good. I think people are going to be very happy with this one if they can get the balance right, and that's why I say take your time. Number three here. You may recognize this. You may recall it from Flat Out Games. This is the third in the line of the trilogy of Calico, Cascadia, and now Verdant. Rodent? Verdant? Verdant. I always screw that one up, no matter what I do and how many takes I do it. But this is another in the spatial tile-laying, card-laying games. And this was the third in the trilogy that was sort of getting the comparisons, the hype, and the, you know, how good is this, and do you need all three? And it raised a very, very impressive, and this is going to sound less impressive right here, you know, $342,000, but you have to remember that the price level was $30. So they had 11,000 people. So the real question was just more for people like myself who love Cascadia, do I really need this? And the honest answer at this point was, well, it's a good price point, and you know, if you can afford to get it and are willing to put out $45 to get it shipped to you, yeah, you probably can, because the first two were relatively harder to get after the hype came out and people said that they were really, really good in Cascadia. Even when I first played it, I said this is going to be a top 10 game of the year. Now with Verdant, I don't know. I don't know with this one. This is more card laying, and so it's giving us something different than the other two in terms of just physically what you're doing. How do you feel about that? I don't know. This is another one that's on very high of my lists to trade and get and acquire post crowdfunding. I couldn't pull the trigger when it came out. I was probably a 7. I'm still probably about a 7. I could see myself going one way or the other. I've seen divisive opinions on people liking one more than the other. I mean, there's a print and play out that people have been testing since the campaign ended. But the games are literally in the process of being fulfilled right now in early October. So I've already seen a few pre-orders pop up on some of the other websites. The availability is going to be there should it, well, potentially be a hit. And how do you feel about that? Do you need another one like this? This is the sweet spot of stuff that I can get played really easily and is really satisfying. So those two things cannot be understated no matter what. That's why it's number 3 on this list. Number 4. Masters of the Universe, CMON's version of it, essentially, right? The North American version of Masters of the Universe. This was an exceptionally interesting nostalgia trip back to the 80s, but also very frustrating from a one versus all, which I'm a huge fan of, skirmish style game with plastic that kind of looked like it was taken straight from the 80s, though. I mean, don't get me wrong. When you look at this, you know, $2 million is $2 million, right? The FOMO is real. The Kickstarter exclusivity happens. The reselling is going to occur. But are you okay with that? Like, I was a 7 prior to campaign, you know, because CMON, as much as people poo-poo it, they actually have some really solid games out of those, you know, things that they have otherwise had trouble with that can be criticized. But when I looked at this, I said, no. This is not for me. I like Rise of Malak. That is my poison at this point. I prefer the others. Give me one of those. He-Man did nothing for me. Some of the sculptures here, as well as, where is it? Right here. Just looks, like I said, straight out of the 80s. Like, I remember having like a toy Castle Grayskull, and it reminds me way too much of that. And maybe people want that nostalgia feeling. I was not one of those people. And for all of this stuff, I mean, you're looking at, again, another $345 just for the gameplay all in. And after I went in for part of Marvel Zombicide, I'm not doing much else, you know? Like, I'm being selective about stuff. And that's where I think this one probably underperformed, is because people weren't as enticed, people aren't as familiar with the IP, and it just didn't have the broad reaching appeal that maybe the nostalgia folks were hoping for. Now, if this would have been a G.I. Joe, if this would have been a Power Rangers, you know, those were bigger more recently. The 80s is a little bit more of a further stretch, even for someone like myself. Now, not that the 80s is that far off, because I'm sure you guys in the comment section are going to, you know, go after me if I say that. But they're just showing off some of the preprints right here. So don't expect to get your game anytime soon. I mean, this one is probably going to be, I'd say, 9 to 10 months, if that, if everything goes right. And this says October 2022. So yeah, that's not anywhere close to happening here. It's just not, you know, I would say 9 months. I would say 9 months if they're going to send it all in one wave. And I don't know if they're sending it all in one wave. CMON sort of stayed with all of the one waves for the most part. But we'll see. This is clearly going to be a ways off. But, you know, maybe 9 months is an overshoot. You know, expect 6 months. And, you know, if it's 9 months, you're disappointed. But if I say 9 months and it's only 6 months, well, hey, then it's a happy day, right? But if you're like me, also, you just back stuff and forget about it. So, like I said, it was about a 6, 7-ish prior to the campaign, 4-ish once it launched, maybe even a 3. So there you go. Number 5, I've talked about this one once elsewhere too. EOS, Island of Angels, more of an engine building, pirate faring, angel equipping, going up against monster devils with your crew of heroes that is upgradable as part of your engine. This was a very interesting game idea from King Raccoon Games. And it only raised about 75,000 euros when it went out, but I'd say the appeal was definitely different, and I could see this one having a lot more success afterwards once people kind of get their hands on it. Now, when you go back to the page here, you can see that December 2022 was the estimated time of arrival, and with the most recent update at the beginning of August, they are nowhere near that. But this will be almost 2 months from the time that this last update was given that I'm filming this, so hopefully we'll have a little bit of more news in the near future. But they're even talking about proofreading and external editing here, and then doing some of the printing. So, you know, December 2022 isn't, you know, a bad estimate, but I think realistically you're probably talking somewhere middle of Q1 of 2023 or end of Q1 if everything else goes right. And this is just kind of a cool aesthetic. And I think it's got a lot of exclusives that if you're wanting this game, you're going to have to pick up a backer's copy. The question just is, as I sort of looked at it on the crowdfunding page in the first place, was there's a lot going on in this engine building. Almost, I dare say, too much. And that's what scared me off. And as much as I wanted some of the exclusive content, because there were some deluxe upgrades as well as some exclusive content in terms of gameplay, that was the ultimate decision that I ended up making. Probably about a 6, solidly. And you know, as I just thought about the other day, I posted on the community page for the channel, should I get Keyforge? And, you know, I should take my own advice. If you're on the fence, the answer is no, right? If you're on the fence, the answer is no. So that's where I ended up doing this one. But we'll see. This is one I could see being a sleeper hit once people get it, if they're able to fine-tune things, keep the balance there, and not make it overstay its welcome. Because I worry when a game already says 30 minutes per player as an engine builder. You know, people talk about engine building being, you know, all of a sudden not being satisfied enough and the engine stopping too soon. But what if it just goes on too long? Drastic other side as well. So we'll see. EOS, Island of Angels. Number 6 here, we have Keep the Heroes Out. Sort of a reverse cooperative dungeon crawler where you're actually fending off as a tile defense-esque game combined with a dungeon crawl of going up against heroes that are trying to loot your dungeon, and you're the monsters trying to, well, keep them out, right? So, and I think some people were probably initially put off by the aesthetic because it has a little bit of a cutesy aesthetic, and it's from a relatively unknown creator. So the question was, you know, is it going to be able to? And well, the answer is yes, because they are currently in the process of fulfilling pledges across the world. And probably one of those ones I dare say now, call a sleeper pick of the week, if you will, if you're following my crowdfunding on a weekly basis. So modularity, asymmetric monsters, dungeon crawl in reverse, essentially, keeping them out. And it's just more of a tower defense, if you will. I think it looks really cool. Upgradable difficulty as you're playing from a cooperative sense. I ended up getting the expansion when it was done, because who doesn't need the expansion right away, right? Yeah, I know. But anyway, is it going to be light? Probably. Is it going to be maybe too light? Maybe. But is it going to be fitting a niche of games that I really love in the first place, cooperatively? Hopefully. And that's why I'm excited to kind of see. And this one is projected in August 2022, and we're talking here at the very end of September, beginning of October, so that's pretty good overall. So I'll take it for what it is, and that's why it's on the list as well. Number 7 here. This is the Stefen Feld City Collection, number 3 and 4, Marrakesh and New York City. A remake as well as a completely new Stefen Feld. And that was sort of the line that Queen Games had going was, okay, we're going to remake some of the very hard to get, the out of print, the out of circulation Feldian games, but we're also going to now, with this second campaign, include a new one. I previously backed the first campaign to get one of the deluxeified ones, the remake of Bruges, but I was on the fence with Amsterdam, the remake of one of the others, I think Macau. And so I didn't have a whole lot of experience with, I believe, one of the remakes here as well as the new one. I think Marrakesh is the new one, and New York City is one of the reimagined games. Now you pull up the crowdfunding page here, and this second campaign was drastically lower. One, because, I mean, it's a new Feld, and so, you know, mixed feelings, mixed opinions. And the other two were much more well-known and well-regarded when it comes to which ones people think are the best. And so, especially with that combination, it only raised about $250,000. Only $250,000, he says. But that's sort of the aesthetic. And also you had people that already backed the additional two for in the first campaign as well. And that's where a lot of additional funds went. And so it's definitely not going to be as much regardless. Now, this is going to be delivering in June 2022. And they are in the process, I believe, of fulfilling it right now. The only question was, do you need some of these other ones, right? I like the idea of some of this stuff, but Feldians are very mixed in terms of what sort of Euro mechanisms I'm okay with and what signs I'm not. Higher complexity drafting with a cube tower. I mean, those words speak to me, but the gameplay, the length, maybe not. And again, area majority game. Oop, I can pass on that. I'm not a huge thing there. And then Amsterdam, action selection mechanism with advanced planning. Okay, that's advanced planning I'm not very good at, but you can kind of see they went deluxeified, you get coins, you can get them numbered, everything that you want with a Feldian Euro game, deluxeified Euro on crowdfunding, right? So where are things at though? Fulfillment update, and they're currently being fulfilled as we talk. More so in Europe right now, and then we're starting to hopefully get a little bit in North America and the rest of the world. So pre-campaign, I had no expectations of this, so it means it was a 2 or 3. You know, I'm going to be interested to see what Marrakesh does just by the names. And you know what? I respect the heck out of Paul Grogan, and he says this is probably replacing it as the #1 Feld game. So, I mean, those are hefty words. So if for nothing else, it's going to be on my radar just from a retail side of things going forward. So will I, end up with it anytime soon? No, but will I maybe eventually a year or two from now try and trade for it so I can experience it as well? I'll give it a look-see. We'll see where it goes. Number 8 here, we're going with Colab. Do you remember Colab? Sort of a unique worker placement, dice worker placement, mad scientist laboratory situation game where, I actually got to play a hands-on copy, and it was kind of an interesting experience. And it really kind of just reinforced that both I like dice, and sometimes I like them in dice worker placements, and sometimes I don't. And the combination of utilizing other people's workers in order to give you the best combination of things you have, as well as the spatial element of laying your cards down that you're buying, essentially building your inventions with their asymmetric abilities and scoring conditions, was a nice combination of things. It was nice to play. I don't know, my brain just doesn't always work the best in those situations though. So that's why I would probably hesitate with those in a lot of the times in the future, because they're going to be almost on an individual basis, try before I buy. Just like Teotihuacan, right? I traded for that, I played it, I thought it was cool, I understand why people like it, but then I traded away because I could also see clearly it wasn't for us. Amazingly enough, though, this one actually had to relaunch because they failed the first time around because they went a little bit too miniature heavy, frankly, and that was sort of, I think, their own admission too. As a Euro game, as a worker placement game even, miniatures are sort of this divisive niche that people don't always have a huge overlap with. And the price point was much better. They raised $200,000, which is amazing. Again, middle campaign, I'm probably still 6-ish, just because I think there's a solid game in there. I worry just about some of the longevity of it, but I think people that are looking for something that, like I mentioned, with the spatial elements, with this, just utilizing other people's dice to your own advantage, and the ability to customize the outer ring of the chambers to give different actions, selections, bonuses, and everything else in between is really, really going to appeal to people. And so this is another one that I see flying under the radar that a lot of people are going to like once they get it. So, yeah. Again, very solid game. I'm not sure it was for me forever. I still kind of want one of those Cthulhu kitty plushies. So Portal Dragon, if you have any of those cat Cthulhu stuffies sitting around after the campaign, if you happen to want to send one my way, I'm completely open from that side of things. Otherwise, yeah, where are things at right now? It was supposed to January 2023, so we're still a ways off from that. And they say in the latest update, just prior to me filming this, that they're still on target. Everything is going according to plan. Prototype copies near me at GrandCon, so you could play it out recently there. So that's it. They're on target. That's all they need to say. Just short update. Not a whole lot of information, but they put out the update just to keep people informed. So there you go. There's Colab. And last but not least, we'll talk about number 9 here. Age of Monia, another in the line of sort of open world-esque games with a heavy fantasy-based mythology, some D&D influence from the designer, and really a persistent world that's going to give actions meaningful consequences as you go forward. Fully cooperative moral choice epic campaign. So, as you heard me say numerous times, how many campaign games can you have? How many? This was relatively well priced. I think a lot of people still said, though, why get it now? There were elements, they had several modules, scenarios up on Tabletopia prior to the campaign. The campaign itself was offering more than 30 extra scenarios that you could go through. So it's got a robust catalog, but we're seeing this now ad nauseum with the current stuff funding at the time of me filming this, like Fate Forged, Kinfire Chronicles, Forsaken. Forsaken's a little different, but these open world games in cooperative competitive senses, we're seeing more of them. Lots more of them. And the question now is just, how do you start splicing the differences? How do you tell which one is going to be a better fit for you? Because also all of these are mostly miniatures and also mostly triple digit price points. And that's where things start to really add up. And so as someone who has become slowly less, not by any means, not at all, but campaign narrative matters a little less than gameplay mechanics. And so the mechanics are really what's been holding me the most with these games. And that's why I've been a little bit standoffish, just because it's a little hard to tell sometimes on surface, even with a rule book, how that flow is going to fit your tabletop scene, especially with those sitting around the table apart from yourself, right? Does you not a lot of good with a 4-player game if you're the only one that enjoys the actual mechanics of it, right? So I was probably a 7.5 prior to campaign. During campaign, it probably dropped to a 5, to be frank with you guys. And right now, December 2022 is the projection of when it was supposed to be delivered. Let's see where that's at. So going back one update for their previous one, I believe, what did it say, in July, they have a little progress bar here that says manufacturing sometime in Q3 and shipping sometime in Q1. The most recent update, though, if you go to the next one, because there isn't one for September yet, has shipping costs and freight costs being exorbitant and having a promo pack here that you can pay for the extra shipping costs from that standpoint. But no other update within the last, almost 60 days from the time of me filming this to tell you if that progress bar that I just showed you is any closer to being in production. If it isn't, well, you're sitting Q4, not just Q3 for production. So the initial goal of having this in December is, I think, past at this point. Because even if you had started production It's still going to take probably 4 to 6 weeks to get here, another 2 or 3 or 4 weeks to get to places, and I think you're going to be talking then probably January at the everything going right standpoint at that stage. So a little bit over probably, but there you go. That's Age of Monia in the line of all the other open world cooperative games that we've seen recently. There you go. There you go. That's the roundup of a year ago. How do you feel about things? What else did I miss? I mean, I didn't cover a few other things, but picking and choosing, trying to be appealing to as many people as possible. So there you go. My own thoughts, my own backings, my own passings, everything else in between. And just, you know, again, talking about stuff that's kind of cool. And hopefully soon, if I look back on the channel, I should be getting close to the point. I think I started doing this in January. And so we'll start to hopefully in the next, 3 months or so, get to the stuff where we can start to say 2 years out. How do you feel about this now? It's been out. It's been sitting there. It's been published. An extra look. Because not only do we look at it when it's crowdfunding, how it's doing afterwards, but does it actually stand the test of time? You know, if you looked or if you missed my little blurb from Tainted Grail, I talked about this a little bit in that video, in the upcoming video that was talking about Tainted Grail prior to the campaign launching. You know, I said, let's compare for a second, you know, the quotes that are on Tainted Grail right now, prior to that campaign being launched, and the same similar quotes that were being put on Ether Fields when it launched on crowdfunding. And how have those stood up over the test of time? Because that's what matters over time, not just the hype at the time. Food for thought. That's all I got. Thanks for watching. Stay classy. See you around. Let me know what you think in the comment section as below. Click. Let me know what else you want to see. Just try and do my best. Stay classy. See you around.